Good. Good evening, everyone. We are going to have our budget workshop tonight. Sharon is going to be on the phone, and we'll just take a roll call, please.
Mayor Dickey,
Here.
Vice Mayor Spellich,
Present.
Councilmember Friedel,
Present.
Councilmember Grzybowski, Councilmember Magazine,
Here.
Councilmember McMahon, and Councilmember Sharnow.
Here.
Thank you. So Grady, you can kick us off if you don't mind.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, as you're aware, one of the most important acts that the Council takes each year is the review and adoption of the town budget. The town budget is a document that encompasses our appropriations and Council's top priorities for the upcoming fiscal year. Our process actually started in November as we were starting to review our revenues for the current year, and also then in December when department directors started submitting their budgets to David and B. We're about halfway through. We're almost done here in terms of we started with our council retreat back in February. We were able to receive a lot of good input and provide the preliminary budget estimates to you then. We also had, so that was in February, and then in March 23rd, we had the council workshop on the capital improvement program, and we received some good feedback and input from you as well. So tonight, we have what I would call a more finished budget document with the detail behind it. And David, our finance director, will go and present this to you, and feel free along the way to ask questions with anything that you may have. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Puck.
All right. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. So here we are. Like Grady said, we're getting close to the end. This is probably the most detailed presentation that you'll have on the budget so far. After this, after your comments tonight, we'll integrate those into the budget, do a little bit more polishing on some of the smaller funds. Come back in May, I think May 1st, for the tentative budget approval, and then back again in June for the final. So, all right. So the best way to start this off is to see kind of where we're going to try and finish up this year, so that we have some beginning balances to carry forward into next year's budget. So as far as general fund revenues go, we're actually doing very well. Our TPT sales tax collections are probably going to finish the year even a little better than this. I wanted to be very cautious and safe when I put these numbers together so that we weren't overestimating what our ending fund balance was going to be. But since I put this together, I actually got the final numbers for March for our TPT, and they were very good again. And we're actually just about $1 million short of what we had budgeted for the whole year. So we still have 3 more months to go, so we should be ending it up pretty well. As far as intergovernmental, we're a little bit below what we had budgeted, about $100,000. And then with our other revenues, we were down about $700,000. But considering we didn't have much of a revenue generating year, it's not too bad. So as far as expenditures go, again, we've done really well as far as we had anticipated or budgeted this year with $19.3 million in expenditures. We're going to probably end up really close to $14 million. So that's a $6 million savings, budget savings. That will contribute to the ending fund balance and general fund as well. Also, just to keep in mind, we had our CARES Act funding that contributed to that savings as well, because we were able to pay 4 months of those invoices with the CARES Act.
That was what I wanted to ask you, that's 2.9 million pretty much, and that's reflected by that first amount, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah, and we had the 300,000 that was approved by council for the business grants that came out of the 2.9. And then we had roughly about 100,000 in services and supplies that we used for pandemic-related expenses, So as far as the actual individual fund balances, Streets Fund had a busy year. We're going to be closing out just around 500,000 in that worst case. That's assuming that everything that's projected to be done by June is finished. Could be a little higher. Obviously, all of the debt service funds, the only payment that we still have to make is Eagle Mountain. Their final payment is July 1st. And then we won't have any debt going forward. There still will be, so in that case, there won't be a tax levy for Eagle Mountain next year. There will be a small one for Cottonwood for that maintenance.
Just to be clear, these are kind of pass-through. So when we say
Correct.
debt, it's not town debt, it's
Correct.
those districts. Thank you.
Correct. And then all of our development fees, those balances have increased over the year as well. So those are all our restricted funds. Committed funds, our rainy day fund, 3.3 million. Capital projects, it's going to end up around 2.2. Then our downtown strategy, economic development and tourism funds. There was a little bit of a hit to the downtown fund, and that was because it helped offset some of the costs for capital projects this year. Correct. And then public art fund was reduced a little bit because we had a contribution for the Fountain of Light in there. And then the court enhancement fund, they had some cameras put in this year. So assigned funds, environmental fund should be right around 300,000 around the end of the year. Our facilities reserve $1 million.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
what is the environmental fund?
Excuse me?
What is the environmental fund?
What is it?
Is it?
It's the fund that was set up to do like wash maintenance and
Okay.
When we
that's
were
where the
collecting-
environmental
I
fee.
get it confused with the charge to the public. That's not
Yeah,
what that is.
Right, that's.
Yeah, so.
That's what it
So
was.
the environmental fund, basically, it had as a dedicated revenue source, it had the environmental fee, and then also transfers from the general fund into that. And then the expenditures hit that as well for wash maintenance and other things that would be appropriate to spend out of that fund.
So some of this is left over.
This is the balance that's left over.
Got it. Thank you.
Right, and for next year, there's gonna, there'll be a transfer into that fund from the general fund to help offset the fees that we're not collecting, so. Let's see, technology replacement fund was a new fund this year. We had done a general fund transfer of 50,000 to get it started, and then that each department gets charged an internal service fee to maintain that each year. Vehicle replacement around 1.4. So then that leaves us with the unassigned fund balance. That's basically our operating money, and this is the one that was affected by the policy change. I guess it was about a year ago. That number, the 9.9, does include the 2.5 million that's left over from the savings, since we were able to use the CARES Act for public safety. So as far as a summary of everything put together, we end up with total fund balance of about $22 million at the end of the year, including that 2.5 million. And then the stability metrics that we've been looking at based on the financial policies. This is actually a little bit higher. If you look at the end of the year, we'll have 45.3% of our annual revenues for general fund. I would prefer to see that around 30, 40, but in the situation that we're in now with the pandemic, I'm not concerned about it being a little bit higher. It does give us basically 5 months of operating revenues.
David, so it's usually 33%, or you kind of want that to be the number?
So our policy had said that we wanted to maintain at least 20. Right now, between 30 and 40
Okay,
would
and
be
then, so,
optimal.
I don't know, for some reason in my mind, it was like you wanted to have 6 months worth, but you don't need 6 months worth.
Well, I'm not going to complain about having 6 months, but it's not like we need to hone in on it. We maintain the minimum level of 20%. Rating agencies and that sort of thing, they like 30%, 33%,
Yeah.
somewhere around in there. So it's not hurting us at all.
And then also, this is just strictly the unassigned, so we
Correct.
saw the rainy day as well on top of this.
And yeah, it's kind of an overall thing to continue to make clear every year that it's almost like having, some of this is like having your mortgage and escrow. I mean, it's
Right.
not just money that can be used anywhere you think you might need it. Some of it is already, obviously restricted, but also some of our capital projects that ran over from one year to another, so it's not as cut and dry as it looks.
Right.
And that higher amount will help us if we do go out for a bond issue in the next year or two? Is that what
Absolutely.
you're saying?
Yes. Uh-huh. All right, well, guess I could have switched to one more slide, but anyways, we'll skip right over that one. We did have a couple slides in here for the CARES Act funding, just to kind of clear any questions there. So we did receive the $2.9 million. Like I said before, that covered about 4 months of our fire and our police service. Since those expenses would have normally been paid from the general fund, they basically became savings and make up part of our unassigned balance. And as mentioned before, council, we did the $300,000 for the business grants, $100,000 for services and supplies. The remainder was left unallocated because we weren't sure exactly where our revenues were going to be for the year. But those have been doing great. So that $2.5 million is currently still there and unassigned. Best practice says that you only use one-time revenues for one-time expenses. We discussed it at the council retreat, and council decided that we had transferred $2 million of that to the streets fund for pavement maintenance and $500,000 to the facilities reserve because we hadn't funded the facilities reserve with our annual funding last year. So there again at the top is the CARES Act. These are minimum estimates for the excess revenues and expenditures. There'll at least be $500,000 going to the capital project fund. Basically $1 million more going to facilities reserve, with $500,000 of that earmarked for the Fountain Lake liner when we get to that point. So,
What is that for?
for the Fountain Lake liner, when we do that project, we're just going to keep kind of a sinking fund going.
Yeah.
An accumulation fund.
We're
just
going to reframe it. It's going to be it's a floating fund. We don't want the lake to sink.
I saw that, and I thought, what the
But
heck?
that's a common term. So we do want to fund basically, as we talked at the, I believe it was the retreat, or maybe it was at the Capitol meeting.
Capitol.
But we want to try to, whatever savings we have year in, we want to start trying to sock away money. Since we have, time is on our side, and maybe we won't have to finance as much as we need, and maybe with some of the funding that we're getting from the feds, that may help as well. So
No, Grady, the 2 million for the streets fund, is that, it probably is, but that was reflected in the capital, all the capital projects that we looked at already, or is that half capital and half kind of maintenance?
No,
or-
the 2 million goes right into the streets fund. And then the streets fund has line items for expending it. So
Right,
David, do you want to?
so the streets fund's
It's
separate
there.
from the capital projects fund, so those aren't, those streets projects, like the pavement maintenance, aren't reflected in the capital projects that we looked at
But,
at the last meeting.
but to clarify, and I asked, and I asked you this last night, total is 4.5 million for streets, correct?
For revenue or for the
Streets fund.
expenditures?
For the appropriation for streets.
For
fund.
pavement maintenance, it's 4.5 million for next year.
Right,
Yes.
just wanted to clarify that.
There's a few more expenditures in the streets fund, but that's what's put aside for pavement, so.
Right, just trying to make it clear, because we do the 2 million regardless every year. Before we do these next questions, I wanted to make sure if Sharon, is Sharon, are you on the phone, and do you have any questions?
I am on the phone and I do not have questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
To catch up on my notes. All right. See, without the question slides, though, I wanted to made it to 50, so, I had to keep them in there. Yeah, we're cruising. All right, so just some disclaimers, I guess, budget disclaimers right up front. Just to keep in mind as we go through the next slides, that, it is budget, it's the proposed budget, there's changes to be made. Keep in mind that the general fund budget is required to be balanced. So whatever we have in revenues, we have to have the equal number of expenditures, or vice versa, depending on which way we go. Overall, we have more revenues next year than we have set expenses. That difference goes into the contingency line item, just to make the budget balance. So just keep that in mind.
Follow up on that, please.
Sure.
I had noticed on the next page, revenues from prior years are used to develop trends, and forecasts use a 98% confidence level.
Correct.
Prior years, including this past year?
No,
Thank you.
but we're not there yet, and I'll just talk about that in a little bit
Okay.
more. So we've already gone through the calendar, so I guess we can talk about it right now. Sorry about that. Yeah, so prior years, we've been very conservative with revenues, and as you noticed, I'm here a lot saying we're beating our budget numbers, we're beating our budget numbers. So this year I tightened it up a little bit, and you'll notice that on the next slide, I believe, with our
Sorry,
TPT.
What does that mean? We've tightened it up a little bit. I'm trying to,
So before, depending, because you can either do trend analysis based on prior years, or forecast, which is also based on prior years, doesn't include the confidence level. We are probably underestimating our TPT alone. I don't know, at least 10%, as far as we were below what we could expect to make.
that's this past year.
This current year that we're in
Right.
now.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
And so you
This
think
is my second year here, so we kept
Right.
kind of the same system last year.
You're saying you think we'll make up for that this next year?
We don't have to make up for anything because we're exceeding our projections.
So if I can just jump in, it's
Sure.
a good, fair question. I think what David's trying to say is, the term tightening up is a good term, because I think what he's trying to say is there's different methodologies for forecasting. And we've been ultra conservative in the past. What he's saying, he's trying to get the ultra conservative kind of be relaxed a little bit to be closer to what the reality's been. But he's still going with a 98% confidence level, which will then still account for some variables with, with revenues that are collected or that we'll experience. And so as an example, for next year, we still are not, since we've not had a full year of the Adero Scottsdale open up and had regular hotel revenue coming in, we're not even counting that next year.
Right.
Same thing with over here. We're going to have the Havenly open up sometime next year. We don't know quite, but we haven't included those as potential TPT revenues. So, but next year, this time, we'll have a better idea what those are going to be bringing in, and we'll go ahead and include those in our forecasting, but we're still always going to be conservative to a fault because, as you know, things like sales tax is very elastic. And if the economy starts faltering or something like that, then we are going to be like a fine-tuned small ship, not an aircraft carrier, and we'll be able to go ahead and make adjustments very quickly versus having a disaster hit all at one time. We're not spending everything that we anticipate that we're going to be generating, and we're not overly, I guess, ambitious as to what we believe those revenues to be.
If the Fed is even close to their prognostication of 6 to 7% GNP, we ought to be in very good shape.
Yes.
So it's safe to say that we're going to be conservative, but not ultra-conservative?
Correct. Yep.
David, is there ever a time we're doing that, like when we do this next year and it looks like we budgeted way low and we're way high, does it ever come back to bite you that it looked like you were too conservative and now you have all this extra money? I mean, it's kind of literally a balancing act what we're doing here, but, I would never want to be overconfident and go too much the other way, but when we're really underestimating, sometimes you get some of the numbers that we're looking at now, so I appreciate that you're kind of looking a little bit more like what might realistically happen.
Right.
Thank you.
There's kind of a, it's definitely a balance, like you said. If we underestimate too much our revenues, then that, our expenditures can only go up to the amount of our revenues. So if we underestimate our revenues, then we could be missing out, on maybe doing park projects or providing some type of amenity to the public that we would have been able to pay for. So you've got that on one hand, but on the other hand, I definitely don't want to be the one standing up here saying, we're short and we're going to have to cut expenditures now to keep everything balanced.
And if I could just jump in too, I think what you're seeing in the budget for next year, a lot of the ambitious things that we have are due to the savings that we have. And I'm not talking about the savings that we have from, the federal money that's come in. It's really on our own. We've had both a combination of increased sales tax revenue, and we've also have been either spending at or below our budget. So we're exceeding our budget projections on revenue, and we are actually below our budget projections on expenditures. As a result, we're seeing that we're going to have additional money we could set aside next year for some major goals of the council, like, the sinking fund, or Fountain Park, and additional money here and there for one-time types of uses. And that's exactly what you want to be in that kind of position. Yeah, and then also our reserves are going up, which is a very good thing because we know that this isn't going to last forever. And so when it starts going the other way, again, we'll be in better position to start making adjustments to our finances at that time.
If the state takes $1 million bite out of us, we're going to have to start over again.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
We're not to that point quite yet, but yes, that's something that we're watching for sure. One more point that I would make is that I would be extremely uncomfortable standing up here saying this is the level of revenues that we can expect, and we don't have any, or maybe a minimal contingency, and have budgeted all of our expenditures right up to that. So if for some reason our revenues fall through the floor next year, the first $4 million that we don't collect don't affect departmental budgets. That's taken out on that the contingency number first. So Definitely helps, definitely helps. We did receive estimates from Department of Revenue and Department of Transportation for state shared revenues for next year. There's still a chance that those will get revised estimates, maybe in the next few weeks. Those come through the league, so we'll be watching for those. I also wanted to mention that the leagues pointed out that all of those revenues are based on census numbers, the census that we just had, but they don't actually have those numbers yet and don't expect to get them until September or so. So there could be, they're trying to figure out exactly how they're gonna handle that situation. So we might be in a situation where we're receiving the same level that we are this year, and then they make up an adjustment, but so that could look a little different. Our sales tax line, the one that's completely flat when I show the presentations, might have a little hiccup in it next year, so wait for the excitement. All right. So now as far as general fund revenues go, you can see the TPT, which also includes the franchise sales tax at 14.2. Intergovernmental actually went down a couple $100,000. Permits and licenses stayed the same. There was some movement in there, but it still came out to be the same. Basically, we didn't have much of a year this year, so we're just carrying along the same type of expectations for next year. Then fines and fees for courts went up a little. And then the other includes donations, sponsorships, interest, what little interest that we're receiving these days on investments.
David, the
Yes.
fines and fees that are there, do they correspond to, well, it's page 4 or whatever in the revenue summary, but, so we have other fees that are there, rental fees, and that you have like the identical numbers from 2021 to 21-22, and I know that we're going to be putting in our new fee schedule on July, I think, but I'm wondering, let's just say you've got engineering fees, 62,250 last year, 62,250. I mean, it's to the dollar.
Right.
A lot of these are the same. Is that some kind of an, is that an accounting baseline or?
Yes, it's called carry the
I don't
current year
remember seeing
over
like
to
the
next year.
exact same numbers like that.
There are, when I started earlier, I said there was going to be some polishing and things to go on, but when we go to the tentative budget, these numbers, basically, like I said, this year was kind of a non-year for a lot of reasons. So keeping the same numbers didn't seem too outrageous. In the overall scheme of things, the things that roll up into that makes a small percentage of the revenues. So, yeah, we could have changed the numbers so that they looked different from this year. But also keep in mind that the column that you're comparing to is the budget, the revised budget or the budget for the current year. It's not actual numbers. So when we come back at the end of the year, there'll be actual numbers shown.
Right, like what now? Okay,
Right.
so,
if you look at the, fiscal year 19 and 20, those are actuals that were reported
so it makes
in the
sense to use
CAFR.
those as the kickoff.
Right.
now. Okay, thanks.
Yep. All right, so overall increase of revenues is 17.9% for the general fund. Now, when we talk about expenditures, we've already talked about contingency a little bit. As we go through the next couple of slides, that is included in the general government portion. Those are basically non-departmental expenses, community contracts, and that sort of thing. Also contingency, if we are collecting the revenue that we're expecting and we're on budget, then it provides us a source for budget authority or the permission to spend those resources by council action, basically, to move money from contingency.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Dave, when I had first taken office, I had met with the mayor and Grady about supplementing the Veterans Memorial, which wasn't getting funded by us at all. They were having to seek donations to paint the memorial and everything. I spoke with Grady, and it is now estimated that we give them $3,500 a year. I met with Sam Coffey over the weekend, who's the chairman of the memorial, and they are adding a whole panel to the memorial, which will include all the veterans in Fountain Hills that served in Operation Enduring Freedom and any of the conflicts on the war on terrorism. And they're spending $28,000 for this panel. I would like my fellow council members to consider raising the $3,500 to a one-time donation of $5,000 instead of $3,500 to help offset the amount of money that it will cost them to add the panel to the memorial and everything. So I'd be interested in other people's comments and if they would back me on that.
Is the 3,500 a line item in here right now, or?
Correct. So, yes, that would be included with our community contracts and general government.
Oh,
And
Okay.
just let me kind of explain this too. So the reason why it's in, we used to have it in several years ago, and then through budget cutbacks several years ago, it ended up getting cut. But I see it very similarly, the Veterans Memorial, the maintenance on that is very similar in my mind to the maintenance for our public art program. It's an asset that's at a town facility, people associate with the town, and you know, I think we get a lot of value because the veterans groups are the ones that are maintaining it, and there's some ownership there. So we went ahead and started including that because it made sense, because we definitely want those amenities maintained. So that's why it's been in there. And I suggested to the vice mayor that if this was something he wanted to do, that to bring it up at this time tonight, which he has done.
Grady, I think that's a great point, because when I have people come into town, one of the first things they request is, where's your memorial at? We heard about it. So I would go along with that thought too. I think it's an asset to the town and very well maintained as well.
Mayor.
Councilman?
Vice Mayor, are you talking about a one-time or annual or?
Well, sorry. Councilmember Magazine, it's Grady has made that a $3,500 contribution for the last 3 years. I'm asking that it get bumped this one time to $5,000, and the following year it can go back to $3,500, but just to offset the $28,000 that they're incurring right now, and they're going to be seeking donations also.
Well, I just find myself wondering if we can't use some of the money from the arts line item to increase it. If they need $28,000 as one time, can we increase it a little bit?
That's a creative way of doing it. I'm not quite sure when you're saying panel, is it one of the reliefs like they currently have for the other memorials on the memorial wall?
You know, I don't want to give you don't quote me on this, but I met with Sam Coffey, and Sam said that they're currently running electric and stuff to the wall right now. I believe there's something for Vietnam, there's something for World War
That's what I'm
II, there's
thinking
something for
too.
Korea. I believe this would just be for the service members who've served most recently. So, but to get an exact, I knew that I had asked him how much it was going to be. He said it was $28,000. I said that we currently give you $3,500. I would ask the council for $5,000. I didn't want to be greedy. To get exactly what the plans are, if you could reach out to Sam and get it from him, but supposedly construction is already going on there.
I just, if I may, I just think for something like this, we can go beyond another $1,500 a year. just doesn't make sense to me not to
So,
go higher.
so what I would suggest is, we would have the funding for this if this is something that council wanted to do. We could go ahead and reduce the contingency by the like amount, and then we can resume the following year back to the $3,500 for ongoing. So if there's a consensus of that, we can make that change, and then we'll bring it back, and it will be in the tentative budget when we come back on May 4th.
It's not clear to me how much you're saying. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean,
I'm gonna let Mike say.
I'm in favor of that. I mean, 7,500, even 10,000 this one time, to me, is not an issue for us, shouldn't be.
So what am I hearing is the amount, because that's what we'll need to know tonight, so we can come back on May 4th with the amount.
It's not just the amount, it's whether it's a one-time or whether
Well,
we're,
we have it built in right now as an ongoing. So all we have to do is add a supplement that would just do the one-time on top of that, which is, they're separate things.
can I ask you a question? So the total of these community contracts are on page 41, right, of the general fund tab. Do we have individual explanations of each community contract yet? I mean, I know that we don't always have that right away.
We do have them built in Munis, but they're not on what we have right with us.
Okay, yes. Well,
As
I
far
guess
as the
I'm
individual
asking
amounts,
because
but-
this brings up another, I know, just the fact that we have others with Boys and Girls Club and things like that. So has anybody put in any kind of request, or are we expanding services, or, so is this something that we could do?
So, well, we've been following the council direction from back when I became manager, that the council was wanting to do a reduction of about 10% a year, which will take probably forever before it actually goes away. And the only one that wasn't receiving a reduction was the Extended Hands Food Bank. This was only put in, the maintenance of the memorial was only put in as a community contract, not to get around the council or anything on the community contracts, but because we require anybody that receives any grant and funding from the town to sign a community contract where they are agreeing to use the funding as earmarked.
Mayor.
Councilman?
I just think we should give others an opportunity who may want to contribute to it. And so I would suggest that we go with half of what they need to do this.
It's a good idea, and that could be like a challenge grant or something.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for it. It just made me think of everything else, because we've been cut, and now that we're sort of seeing ourselves in a different situation, it didn't even occur to me to stop with those reductions. And I have to say, I didn't, I see the total amount, and it's a little higher, but I don't know, well, at least the events were, and so I don't know. And I didn't realize that something like this would be considered a contract, because I'm kind of stuck at the past, knowing that we had the 4 entities and that kind
Yeah,
of thing.
and it
so.
was never treated as a community contract, other than
Okay.
the fact that we had them sign a community contract. Because I saw it as something, if they weren't maintaining
We're
it,
not voting on anything.
we would be maintaining it. So, just like our public art, I see it as just the same as our public art program.
Okay, well, I think you get the picture, right? Because this is a work study session, we don't need to do, a vote, but I think before we actually do the budget, we'll probably have other things that are going to kind of come up, so,
And
but I
if,
think,
and if the council's pleasure is, if you want to forego doing the 10% reduction next year, that's another option the council has as well,
okay,
so.
thank you.
All right, so then did we settle on 14
14,
total
yes.
for next year? Okay.
In one-time supplement.
And that 14 is including the 3,500 that we would have normally done, or is it?
They still have
is
to
it
maintain
total?
what they have, so I would say it's on top of that from what I'm hearing.
Okay, so the normally scheduled 3,500 plus 14.
Right.
Okay.
Sorry about this, but the 3,500 then is not considered a usual contract, community contract, but it's an ongoing, how do you describe it?
I would consider it, they've lumped it into the community contracts, but I would consider it as a maintenance line item is what I'd
Okay.
really call it, and we're contracting with them to do that work for the town.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So then just to finish off this one slide, just to make this point, as far as the expenditures for a comparison from the current year to next year, there was a $1 million increase for the general fund, not counting the contingency, so. And all of those amounts include the supplements, which we're going to go into next. So I'm not sure if everybody's had a chance to go through these, but I thought I would just read through them rather quickly, and then if there's any questions about any specific ones, you can just interrupt me and we can discuss it. So we have a town services. That didn't take long. Okay.
Who would be performing this and for what purpose?
It would be through Bo Larson, through the Bo
Well,
Larson. our
actually,
community
no, actually,
relations.
we would be using an outside firm to help us with this. This would be a statistically valid survey that would be conducted. We would be trying to use this as a baseline to see the satisfaction level with our services. It would also help us determine in the future if we needed to cut services, that they would be able to get from the citizens what their prioritization of services that we're currently providing. This is an excellent way, I think I mentioned this to the council in the past, that we can also have some additional questions in there to gauge them about certain things that they'd like to see in the town or what have you. This is a really useful tool. It will be geo-coded so we can find out based on the people where they live in town if there's problems with some of the services that are being delivered or the roads that they're complaining about. I mean, obviously we know where the roads are, but as an example, if they're not satisfied with certain services, we can kind of pinpoint where the areas are and we can work at trying to make improvements. So it's all about continuous improvement with service delivery.
I think it's a great idea. I would suggest that if we can, we also determine the age of the respondents and the income level.
Yeah, we might have a little bit of a challenge maybe with the income level because people don't like to really reveal that with a telephone survey, but we may be able to do that with.
It'll be telephone, that's right.
Yeah. So, but it's good information.
Will this information be in any way used for SPAC or for Vision Fountain Hills?
It could be used by them for sure.
Okay.
And the other thing that's useful about this information is we'll have a report that comes out of it, and it will provide, I think, some good guidance and direction to the council in the future about services and maybe areas where we need to invest more in certain services. So it's a really good tool. I've used the same firm in the past in different cities, and Fountain Hills used this firm several years ago as well. So it's a good tool.
All right. Number 2. Electric vehicle charging stations. We're putting in a couple charging stations this year. There's some annual maintenance that's required for those, so those are included as a supplement. Also, the same thing with the fountain webcam that's on the web or Earth Cam now. There's some annual maintenance along with that, subscription costs and that sort of thing. Increase in the intergovernmental relations. That's for our liaison with the legislature.
So if I can just step in and just share a little bit about the thinking or reasoning behind that. So right now, we pay roughly about $24,000 a year for the firm of Jack Lunsford. And if you recall, he was the one that really helped us tremendously with the flight path change that was going to happen and did not happen. He's got a lot of influence with people in both Washington, D.C., Congress members and senators. But I think you've seen probably through the legislative process that we really need some, maybe supersize that a little bit more, that we can use some additional assistance. And then as we're starting to get into Maricopa Association of Governments is considering, the Prop 400 reauthorization. There needs to be some additional lobbying on our behalf to try to work with both MAG and other cities and towns so that our interests are represented at the table. And we just don't have the staffing or the resources to do that. Again, when you think about how much is at stake, we're talking millions of dollars in funding for transportation projects and transit that we want to be a player, and if we're not, we can lose out on all that kind of money. So when you look at the investment, it's a very small amount that we potentially can get.
All right. The next one's for a backup power supply in the network room. Emergency vouchers for the domestic violence victims. Contribution to MAG to address homelessness.
I had a quick question on that. The 50,000, is that based on a formula on our population, or how do we arrive at that number?
So I actually looked at the city of Tempe's budget from last year, and I just kind of took it on a per capita basis and multiplied it by our population. It would have been probably closer to 60,000, but I thought as a first year to see what comes up, I thought 50,000 was a good round number. So again, Tempe was used because they have probably more in the way of human services than some of the other mid-sized cities in the valley, and they're very impacted by homelessness.
And so the plan is for MAG to kind of take over on a regional basis, right, to kind of get a handle on this or come up with solutions?
Right, and exactly, and there may be, I'll be honest with you, there may be some opportunities where we can use some of that money locally, you know, if there are some best practices that fit with that. But I would suspect probably all or most of it will go to Maricopa Association governments for a solution with homelessness.
Yeah, they've hired staff to, you know, tackle this as in a regional way. And so this is kind of, at first it was just probably a few of the cities, and all of the cities are involved now. And they're actually having, I think tomorrow, another, I think Peggy, you've been going. So there's another one tomorrow. So I think that this is helpful because I think a lot of people are kind of, you know, it's a complicated issue. We don't know what to do, and to the idea that we have some experts that are working on it that could help us. And even if this doesn't go all, like you were just saying, Grady, to MAG, it may end up being part of what some of the solutions come up to that we would be able to use locally. So I think it's a good idea right now.
All right. The next three should be everyone's favorite kind because they kind of take care of themselves. They offset. They all three involve the court enhancement fund as part of, or one of the fees that's included in anything that comes up with the court goes towards this fund. It is basically earmarked and can only be used for court enhancement type items.
I noticed that Xerox machine lease was a 30% increase. Was there any thought given to just buying the machine outright?
There is. It's kind of one of those questions that comes up quite a bit, especially with copiers. But I won't say it's the problem. The consideration needs to be the maintenance and the supplies that come along with leasing. If we own the machine, then we're on the hook to fix it and pay for it compared to a lease where if something happens, it would be included with the plan. So for the amount of the increase, it's negligible as far as the overall cost. So, all right. Let's see. That brings us to the donation and sponsorship contingency. This is basically for community services. Right now, there's no mechanism for if they receive a $5,000 donation for an event, let's say, that they can use that and not hit their own operating budget. So this is just giving them a little bit more room to be able to accept sponsorships and donations and utilize that money. And then a janitorial supplies increase to help. I believe that's with the parks.
Kind of a question about all these supplements so far. Having it in this form instead of, so some of these are pretty small amounts, instead of just in a budget. Is there a particular reason for doing it this way?
Absolutely. It helps us.
Great question.
Well, I'm glad to hear
It's a
that.
very good question. So we work off of a base budget system, and so the concern is if these just go through and they just get added, over time, you start seeing that these budgets start to become bloated. And I don't mean that in a bad way towards my department directors, because they're all very good budgeters. But we started off when I first came here, in fact, my very first year when I was the administrative services director, the previous manager had a different way of doing budgets, probably in areas that were a little bit, had more money or more affluence or what have you. And we would add basically the items that we thought we needed in our budget, and then we'd come back and say, we're going to have to cut everybody's budgets by 10% because people asked for too much or whatever. This is a really good systematic way to go through review process and to ensure that what's being asked for is essential. And then, as you could see, there's one time and then there's ongoing. So the one time, a lot of those are like, you'll never see again. The ongoing will then become part of the new base budget. So this time next year, that will be part of the base budget next year. So that's the whole process. So it's more of a systematic way to ensure that the budgets don't become a little bit bloated, or as a small organization have to really, when I was a department of one and I was looking at 10%, it was going to be my salary was going to have to be cut by 10%. I don't want to go that way with my department, so.
Well, I definitely like the priority levels that they assign on the, like that, so. yeah.
I have to be honest with you, and this is true.
this is
I was just telling the mayor this earlier, and David, I knew about all these supplements. I met with my department directors. I had the summary list. They all met and gave me their supplements verbally. I did not see this, and I gave him a hard time on Friday when I saw what had been sent to the council. I said, what did you do? I have not, you didn't even run that by me. And I was like, oh, it's embarrassing. And they said, no, they've got a good
Yeah, good job.
personality.
I mean, more can get by him, it's just keep trying,
I do have to admit, it was meant to be like an internal, so that we'd have forms and it would be all formatted and everything for when we did our meetings,
Nice try.
departmental meetings.
I just thought there'd be like little.
He was the one that, he said that he wanted to include all the backup with the supplements so that you guys would be able to see the justification
It
for
could have been
it.
like little sad
And then-
faces
and-
or happy
yeah.
faces. It was just like, it was, well, it gave us a little chuckle, that's all.
Figured it was better than low, medium, and high, because that, that just gets boring. So anyhow, as far as the rest of the non-personnel supplements, we had replacing the drinking fountains at Desert Vista Dog Park. There was a replacement for one of the posting kiosks at Fountain Park. Some ongoing landscape cleanup at Golden Eagle and Four Peaks Parks.
And I'll just address those.
Yeah, I want to ask about that perimeters.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, if you've noticed, and I looked at some old pictures and old photos of those two parks, over time, and I'm not being critical of the staff, but over time, the desert has just taken over what used to be much more pristine. I'm not saying we're replacing it with non-desert vegetation, but a lot of the bottle brush and other invasive type species have kind of taken over the perimeters of the parks. And so what we're wanting to do is kind of prune that down, get it all clean, bring back that pristine look that it once had, and that's what that's all about. And at some point, we're going to be doing the same thing with some of our rights-of-way, that when you drive by, you see a lot of that overgrowth, and that's going to help with fire prevention or at least manage that. But that's what the idea is right there. And there is a cost impact, so the staff rightfully asked for the supplements.
All right. Next is a senior softball tournament. This was an additional tournament that was added for the year, and that has a corresponding offset because they do collect fees for those. Park restroom cleaning and deep cleaning. This was in response to the contract that we have to clean park restrooms, and then to also add a once-a-day thorough cleaning at the end of the day.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Dave, how help me understand, how can this be so high? How can this number?
Which one?
The cleaning the bathrooms for 43 grand.
Well, I'll tell you.
Okay.
And Rachel, you might want to come up as well. So part of the issue is we used to lay a lot of this on our park attendants. And the park attendants were basically these glorified folks that would clean the bathrooms. And we've lost a lot of park attendants because this is nothing. When you look at all the different cities in the valley, the park attendants are basically there to help with the reservations, trying to watch and monitor the stuff going on in the parks. Yes, if there's trash maybe overflowing in the bathroom, they may get that picked up. So this was something that we were actually having a lot of turnover on. And we were initially last year when the pandemic started, we started having just the opposite. The park attendants would do some of the cleanup, and then these guys would come in at the end of the day and just kind of finish it off. We're kind of reversing it now, and so we're going to have the firm do it, and then park attendants will just kind of make sure the paper supplies are kept up. If the trash is overflowing in the trash cans, that's getting picked up. We've also had Darrell will be opening up the bathrooms and things like that. And Rachel, you want to kind of add on? Because this is more or less a new cost that we really haven't experienced before.
Actually, so it's a great question, and I'm happy to clarify. So each restroom in our park takes roughly an hour a day to clean. So our park attendants manage them throughout the day. At the end of the night, you can imagine what condition most of our bathrooms are in, especially lately because of their COVID situation and the usage our parks see. So if each bathroom takes roughly an hour, multiply that by 7 restrooms, and one park attendant, that's all they do on their 8-hour shift. It would be to clean restrooms. It takes them almost their entire shift, so we would need to supplement with a second person just to do the park side of things, i.e. pulling trash and cleaning up in the actual parks themselves outside of the restrooms. We did a small contract probably this time last year, maybe a little earlier when COVID hit, to help with the cleaning, so that we were doing cleanings kind of every hour or every 2 hours in our restrooms to make sure that they were disinfected and things like that. The contract went really well, and this is a result of that trial process to make sure that our bathrooms are being maintained and cleaned and sanitized properly throughout the day and the evenings.
Would we not be under 43,000 to hire a full-time park attendant? I mean, our full-time park attendants aren't making 43 grand a year, are they? Because that's a little bit above what I make. So I think I'll clean toilets instead of chase perverts. So
We are having trouble maintaining our part-time staff at that level, to be quite honest. It's not a fun or pretty job, and they take it on willingly. But when you walk in and find all kinds of things waiting for you in the restroom at the end of the night, it is not a fun job. And while a lot of folks are willing to do it, if that's their end-all be-all, that's what they do day in and day out, over and over, 5 days, 7 days a week, it has been a difficult position to fill.
The other beauty of this is that this is a contract with a company that is are building some facilities here. So we're getting some economies of scale here that we're benefiting from with the larger contracts that we have with them. They also do a really good job of the cleaning. And when we've had the park attendants that we've had turnover on having to do this, then it's getting harder and harder to maintain these bathrooms. So unlike a contract, the contract is obligated to show up and do the job. And if someone's sick with the company doing this, they have to get somebody to do the cleaning. So we also have more bathrooms now. We have 2 that were added over at Fountain Park, so that's added a little bit more to this expense than what we probably would have had 2 years ago.
yeah, what I would like to see, and I don't know if it's a possibility or not, but when we are renting facilities, like when we're renting the fountain area, or when we're renting, if there could be a fee that would be added to the fee that the people pay already to rent the park as a bathroom fee, I think it's only fair that if the bathrooms are going to get blown up by an event, used, not blown up. If the bathrooms are going to be heavily used during these events, I would think it's only fair, and it only makes sense that there be a line item charged along with the rental for that particular event to have, like, I could only imagine what it would look like at St. Patrick's Day. So, but I think that there should be a line item there. It's an increase, and also let's keep in mind that the cleaning supplies went up considerably also when, if you guys remember, 2 years ago when they had the plans to build the Taj Mahal of bathrooms, and they were saying it was only going to be a couple $1,000s for toilet paper and everything. I poo-pooed that, no pun intended, and said that there was no way that it was only going to be a couple $1,000s in cleaning supplies, toilet paper, and all that. Now we see that it's much more money that we're spending. Yes, they're beautiful bathrooms and we needed them, but I just think that somehow if someone is having a big event and that event is going to really use those facilities, I think that there should be some line item in there where we at least recoup a little bit of it.
I think we can certainly look into
I
that.
think it's a fair question, and I do think we'll look into it, Vice Mayor.
Absolutely.
Oh, no, that's fine. Actually, just to make it a point, though, we have already adopted the user fee, like the mayor had mentioned earlier, for next year, but we can definitely add that to the next revision.
Something
since it would
we
be-
could do too is we could look at the model, since we have the model.
Right.
And see if they included that as a line item in the model that was a factor as well.
All right. That leads us to the home delivered meals, extra cleaning supplies and safety supplies in response to COVID and kind of that extra precaution since we're serving that community. And then finally, fire department with some new airbags for their operations. Then that finishes up non-personnel. Then we go into our personnel supplements. First one on the list is your favorite, so that you can get more and better accounting information. Adding the position of a senior accountant. And that one actually does come with an offset, because if we were able to add that position, we can rewrite some of the job description for the accountant position and make it a quarter-time auditor, so that we could do some of the smaller TPT audits that our contract auditor wouldn't touch. So that's where you see that offset there.
And also, just to let the council know, so we had I believe it was a supervising accountant back probably 2 years before I started, so it was probably like in 2012, 2013. The other departments over time have been able to kind of get their positions back, not to where they were before, because we never will ever be there. But this was a critical position. It never, finance has been without this critical position for at least 7 or 8 years. And so this will really help alleviate a lot of workload that we have just on the one account right now.
And she would really appreciate it. All right, next is reclassing one of the clerk positions in the court to a senior clerk. And then next one is renewing the contract for the court collections clerk.
I talked to Grady a little bit about this. Is
Sure.
there, you don't have to know it now, but some sort of an idea of how much of that gets offset by the activity of the court collections
Collect-
clerk? No, you
Joe
don't.
Wagner? Do you have
I don't need that
anything
right
you'd like
now. Yeah, just an idea, because I know this was a hot topic, so, thanks.
So is that still a part-time then, type thing? Or?
Yes.
It is. I'm thinking eventually it hasn't been realized what we would have liked in terms of the revenue, but also I think what we probably should have done on the front end, but we didn't have a lot of time before this position was originally requested, is looking at delinquency rates of other courts and how we factor in and how we rate with that. This position certainly has been helping with the collections. I think with the previous Court administrator, unfortunately, the emphasis wasn't as much on collections as I would have liked. That has changed with the current court administrator. And I believe that the judge and the court administrator have been working more diligently on this. I don't believe the judge was aware of that as we know today. So this is put in as a contract position, so it's unbenefited. It is part-time, and eventually it would be great to have that possibly turn into a full-time position with benefits. But, you know, we want to see a little bit more return on investment, I guess is the way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, I would just think over time, I mean, I know there's new delinquencies all the time, but it just seems to me as years go on here, it's kind of a, you know, law of diminishing returns as far as collecting some of the older ones, like you're just not going to get it, you know, so.
Right.
But I know you'll stay on top of it, so.
Thank you, Mayor. Just some information. I had the opportunity to meet with the new clerk of the court, and we spent an hour talking about this. As you know, that it was my suggestion that we do this. And though I was a little disappointed in the amount that was collected, I also didn't take into consideration, and what she pointed out is that we're in the middle of COVID. So it was very hard to collect these past due amounts from while COVID was going on, especially when you know, people weren't even paying their rent and everything. So I was disappointed in the actual figures. There was an increase, a considerable increase from years past, but we have to take into consideration COVID. Also, they have increased the amount of tax levies, so people that should have gotten tax returns that owed the court money, they were able to put a lien on that and get that money back. So through that process, as well as the judge being more open to bench warrants and that, which can only be in criminal cases, not civil. So like I said, I'll reiterate the fact that I was somewhat disappointed. I expected more, but I also didn't take into consideration COVID. And you know, if you're going to get a stimulus check or anything, you're not going to pay your past court fees. You're going to pay for rent, food, and everything else. So I hear Councilman Charno's concerns, and I too am concerned, but I would think that if we could give it another whirl without COVID being involved and get a better idea of what it looks like, I think it would be better that way.
Okay. Next is moving the part-time town engineer to full-time position.
Question.
Yep.
Do we have an assistant town engineer?
We do. Our town engineer, who had been promoted in December, opted to demote back to the assistant town engineer, but she is finding that she has some family needs that it's going to probably cause her to leave. And so this is one of those types of professional positions that you almost never see part-time. You always see full-time. So we're requesting to turn this part-time assistant town engineer come July 1st into a full-time position that we can recruit for.
That's why I was asking.
All right, then we have a supplement for a temporary GIS technician. This is to cover that vacancy on a temporary basis. Then also adding a half-time FTE, 20 hours for evenings at the community center. And then adding a full-time groundskeeper 2 and a lead park attendant.
Yeah, if I can go back to the customer service representative too. So this is the person that's at the front counter when you walk into the community center. Right now, when we have events going on in the evenings or on weekends, we typically have what we call our operations support workers. Are the ones that do the setup and takedown. They're very good, they're very helpful, but we don't really have anybody that is able to assist with questions about what program is where and so forth. That's not their job and they don't really know that. This is going to provide additional eyes and ears in the building, and particularly with us going through a remodel, I think this is really, critical to do. And it's also a higher level customer service, so I think this is a really good thing.
All right, and then actually the final one is going to be the align the pay for park attendants and the community center operations workers. Yes.
Say that again, please.
Sure. What was that?
Say that again, the last one.
So this is just aligning the pay between park attendants and community center operations workers.
We did a salary survey of the positions. Remember I was telling you that the park attendants, we've been having a difficult time keeping them on staff. We actually looked at what they're being paid across the valley.
He's talking about the other one,
Let me interrupt you. I think I was talking about another one, but
activity
maybe,
center
I
coordinator.
was asking about the activity center coordinator.
Actually, that one's been removed from
Yeah,
from
I was going
this,
to let
so-
you know. So Rachel had brought to my attention, so the former community center manager had requested to convert that position from part-time to full-time, thinking he was helping the employee and do a favor and that there was a need there. Rachel found out later that the employee really would prefer just to maintain being part-time. And so we're going to withdraw that from the budget at this time. Thank you.
Oh, Grady, were you able to, I know I sprung this on you at the last minute, but to get that FTE
I asked
information?
David to be ready for that, so thank you for asking that in advance.
You weren't supposed to say that. You were just supposed to be
Yeah.
impressed with my knowledge of
Oh, okay.
FTEs.
Never mind.
Well, we always do, in the presentation, we typically have a slide that shows the bar
Right.
chart with the FTEs, but it's usually the current
And
year,
then-
and then next year, if we haven't had any change, it's usually the same. But
Right.
we will have that in the tentative budget presentation.
Right.
So
But
what,
just for your information, as far as the current year, we're not counting council positions. We're at 62.07, and with these supplements, it would be 65.95.
and that took the position we just deleted.
Correct.
So one of the things that we often talk about is our per capita staffing, which has always been very lean. This doesn't seem like it would affect that very much. And maybe at some point before we do the budget, we can, because, we had those comparisons with some other valley cities and towns to say, well, this is how many people you have, not counting fire, of course, and police, but,
do.
apples to apples, yeah.
I remember having that file, so yes, I can get that updated.
Thank you.
This was just an overall, and it looks like a lot of lines, but it is an increase of 3.9 FTEs.
Yeah, and let me just comment, this is the first year since I've been manager that I've had anything that looked anything like this. And a lot of it had to do with the departments have had a pent-up demand for a lot of these positions. As an example, the full-time groundskeeper, several years ago when we added the linear park, we didn't increase staff. We've added more park space, and we've enhanced Four Peaks Park, and we've added trailheads. And all these have impacts, and so I think it's good. It's recognizing that we need to keep up with the maintenance needs of these facilities.
All right. So then as far as overall general fund expenditures, you'll notice that the bottom number at 22.7 matches our general fund revenues. This basically just breaks it down by department, so all of those.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Dave, can you explain to me, you have budgeted for the town council $75,000, and with all of our salaries, it's 36. Did you give us a raise and we don't know about it, or we're
I think
we're
it's
getting a
safe to say
bonus?
no.
Okay, so explain to me how I total 36 and you got 75.
The rest of us are getting more than you.
Really? That's not fair, Alan.
There are other expenditures in there as far as meetings, memberships, dues, that sort of thing, that, not saying that all of them get used every year, but that's what the budget has been. It hasn't changed.
Well, I just
year
want to
over
make
year.
sure that the public doesn't think that the 7 of us are splitting 75 grand.
And that's absolutely not the
It's
case.
absolutely important that the media reports that the council's salaries are $36,000 a year, not 75.
And you can find that on page 17 under General Fund tab, because everything that's here is nicely organized in this book. And I just want to thank your finance department so much, because this has been a pleasure.
Is the 75,000 for this year on target?
It never changes.
Well,
I think we're actually way below that number because I don't think there's been a lot of meetings and conferences.
There's not
and
been
that
any
sort of thing.
travel.
yeah.
Yeah. So,
Can I ask you another question?
Yep. I said yes.
Why is general government up 115%?
that is a great question, and thank you for asking it. That's actually where the contingency lives. The contingency number lives there. So that's basically the $4.2 million in contingency that we don't have budgeted in a line item for a fixed expense.
Why not? I mean, for the public's sake, isn't there a way to break that out so it doesn't look like a 115% increase in a year?
Well, if we budgeted it into the operating budget, then you would see that amount there. So, I mean, it's not going to go away.
But there is detail in the budget that backs this up. So if they went into the general government, they would see exactly they'd see where the line item is.
Right. That's the important thing.
I want to
This-
know how many citizens are doing that.
Well, this is a presentation that we're getting with summaries, and every one of these has a tab with everything detailed. And so it literally has why all of these
No
things are
matter
the way
how
they
you
are.
slice it, you're going to have that net dollar amount go up by that amount. So it's still going to be like a 17.9% increase next year, due primarily to the general government contingency.
Right. And contingency is basically the plug number. So, our revenues are estimated at 22.7. We're in the fortunate position where our operating budget doesn't equal 22.7, and it's 20, or 18.5, I think is what we had. And so we need to make that budget balance somehow, and that's in our contingency number. And I think that's broken down. Yes. I could have flipped the slide. But yes, you do see the 4.2 in contingency. The 664,000 for supplements that we just went over, that would go down just a little with some of the changes, so. Should I hurry up and get to the next page? So there you can see, though, that the revenues and expenditures equal the same amount. So we do have a balanced general fund budget. And there's town council. So you can see wages for 36,000, and then we've got the taxes that also go along with that, meetings, trainings, contractual services, for a total of 75. And we do make you pay for your computers, and that's the internal service fund charge. So, all right, then as far as the administration department, if there's anybody that has, I do need to mention this. You're going to see this on every department that does have software involved. The dues and memberships, we used to put our software licenses into that number. We've added an object code in a different classification at Grady's request, and that is now in the maintenance and repair character.
What's in maintenance and repair?
The software licenses. So for example, our financial accounting system, each year we have to pay a license to use that system, and we would put that into that maintenance and repair line now.
That didn't jump it up to 168, did it?
That's kind of that.
So
Yes.
what we're trying to get at, council member and council, is that dues and memberships are typically your professional dues and memberships, or memberships of the town to organizations. And so it doesn't make sense to have things that are really computer related to be mixed in with that, because to the public who looks at that, they like, wow, we're fat cats belonging to all these That's not the case at all. So it's more appropriate how they changed it, and I'm very pleased with how they changed it going forward now.
So as far as the percentages, these definitely look strange, but I want to let you know that those two are the reasons why that's happening. The bottom line budgets, as you can see on the next slide.
Good suggestion for format. In a situation like that, why don't we put in a footnote so that the public can understand what it is?
That's a good
Same
We can
thing,
do that.
same thing on the previous page.
Sure.
Where it looks like we're jumping way the hell up. Why not have a footnote explaining why it looks like that?
And that's a great point. Yes, on these slides, we can have that. I tried to do that on the, with the CARES Act funding and asterisks and that sort of thing, and that would be an excellent point.
Good point. We'll do that.
Overall, for administration, there's a 5.4% increase, and that's something else that I needed to mention. So that is basically caused by supplements that we've gone over, but we've also included, just like we did for this current year, a 2.5% cost of living adjustment to take effect in January for half the year. So that's going to drive some of the wage costs on each of these departments as well.
Did I hear you say 2.5% for half the year?
Correct. That's how we budgeted for this year.
Right.
And
The current year, the council last year authorized 3.5%. It went into effect the first full pay period in January of this year. So this would be a year later, a 2.5% that would go into effect. Obviously, subject to council's review and consideration on that.
I'm having trouble. So it's 2.5 instead of 3.5?
Last
Last
what
year
we
was
just
3.5.
had, well, council, I think last year I asked, because of COVID and such, I had asked for 2%. And then we talked about it in the fall based on how revenues were going. Then the council said, well, heck, instead of 2%, why don't we make it 3.5%? So in January, the 3.5% went into effect, and that will be through for a whole year, 3.5%, and then we're suggesting January of next year, a 2.5% cost of living.
Okay.
so we kind of went a half-year hiatus at the beginning of this year, and then we'll do annual from here on.
But I think with the council, with what they did, it was very generous in January, 3.5%. So I think that's, we're not wanting to be, that high.
All right, and so then the breakdown of the general government department, you can see that the dues and memberships, meetings, trainings, that sort of thing, there isn't any software related to non-departmental, so that stayed the same. You see contractual services, supplies, and then obviously our contingency line item at the bottom. As we go through and refine the budget, again, this contingency number is going to fluctuate because it is going to make up the difference so that we can balance. So
If we didn't have that jump in contingency, what would the year-to-year percent change look like in total expenditures? Any idea?
for this specific department, I don't have that number. I can tell you that not counting any contingency from this current year to next year, there is only a $1 million increase in the overall general fund total operating budget. So would that be a 20th?
Were you putting the 2.5 in there, into that contingency, the whole amount?
Well, and see, last year we had 1.7 in contingency. So if we take that 1.7 out of this year's budget and take the 4.2 out of next year's budget and compare to apples, it'd be 17.5 million to 18.5 million
Okay.
for the overall general fund, not just for
Because if
general
you take that
government.
2.5 out, that's only like $40,000
Right.
more.
For if you took those out, you basically have about 500,000 that's in general government without contingency.
Okay.
In the municipal court,
Need another footnote.
add the asterisks. Got it. But that's exactly it. Dues and membership and maintenance and repair. That's where those two changes are. And we won't get into a discussion about percentages and But you can see it goes down 90%, up 900%. It's fun with numbers, right? Overall, court budget actually did decrease. There were some one-time expenditures in the current year that are not ongoing, so it did go down. Public Works, not a lot of changes. This is where the engineer lives, though, so that supplement is going to be included in these numbers. Overall total 11.7% increase for that department. Development services, again, stayed relatively unchanged. They did acquire a new software system this year. They did just receive it this year, though, and I believe that might have been the reason why we actually added the software object code. I'm not sure if it went in. So you don't see that difference between dues and membership and maintenance and repair here because we actually put it in the right spot this year. 14.5% overall increase. Community services. Again, all the supplements for community services are in here, which account for most of these changes. They did have 60,000 in capital expenditures. I'm not sure what that was off the top of my head, but they don't have any capital expenditures in next year's budget.
Maybe it's
That come directly
it's
from the
probably
department.
Fountain or something, maybe.
What's that?
The fountain, lighting, or?
That could have been, what's that? So a vehicle. Okay. All right, so overall 9.5%. So you can see the percentage increase is relatively the same as the other departments as well. Everybody's favorite, standing in the back of the room, our fire and emergency medical services. Captain Dave. So yes, we got the contractual 3% increase, as well as a few minor increases across some equipment and that sort of thing. So.
Councilman? Let you put your thing on there.
Who, me? I did.
Preemptive. He's waiting for the next slide, maybe?
I just, I hate to nitpick, but I will. You know, when if any public looks at this and sees a 47% increase, I'd have a footnote. Try to explain, if we can, as succinctly as we can, why these giant jumps.
If I was able, and I agree, and we will add footnotes to future presentations, but there was a lot of material behind this presentation that was included in the packet as well that's available. We do end up getting a 420-page budget book created out of this. So trying to get all that information on 50 slides is a little bit difficult. I would say that if there's questions on specific line items, they do correspond to the actual proposed budget that was included as well. So that's kind of for anybody watching or for anybody that sees us in the.
The other thing is the amount. I mean, it could be a really huge percentage, but the
Right.
amount is $2,000 or something.
Exactly.
So just keep that in mind.
Yes.
I have a question. On the law enforcement and the general fund on page 48, it goes from 3,000,008 to 504 the next year. That's a big increase. Can you please tell me what you base that on?
On law enforcement?
On law enforcement, it's page 48, and it's under the law patrol. That's like $1 million. Between this year, next year. Page 48.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Oh, yes, okay.
Right, this is 5 million,
Okay,
really 5 million.
but we still had it budget, oh, we did, okay, so, yeah, when we did get the CARES funding, we had to move a portion of the general fund budget into the grants fund so that we could actually pay because we didn't have enough budget in the grants fund to pay the 3 million. So since that is a revised budget column, it's showing after the fact, after we moved that funding, so.
But when the budget is adopted and in the adopted budget that's published, it'll show the actual and it'll look more normal. It won't
Right.
have that variation that you're seeing right now.
And this is a great point to bring up now, because we have got the total law enforcement and the total fire EMS budgeted in the general fund right now, because I have not received anything from Department of Treasury as far as guidance, what it's going to require us to do, not require us to do, if it's going to be the exact same situation as CARES Act. Nothing from the state at this point. So to be safe, we've got the entire amount budgeted at this point in general fund, but we've also got 3 million included in our grants fund if it does come through. So it's kind of in two places right now. Once we do know for a fact that we're receiving that, then the general fund budget will go down for that line item, but it's just going to increase the contingency number because we still need to maintain the same amounts. Great question. Sorry it took me a minute. All right.
And just to remind the council on the rural metro contract, it's got a built-in multiplier of 3% a year, so it's predictable every year. And then on the, we were fortunate this year with the law enforcement contract with MCSO, it came back in at 2.5%, adjusted for next year, which I believe had some impact due to the audit that's going on right now.
Question? What's the situation with the pension? Why is it so low? Why is it 2.5% when we were told it was going to be 10% a year forever?
Well, it's, we had some pretty big increases in past years. And again, we're not really sure why it was only a 2.5%, but we can only speculate why it went up. They based the contract, according to the contract language, based on the services provided at and the cost for the prior year. So like year to date this year, but they have to really look at the prior year to kind of normalize and figure out what they need to charge us for the following year. And so we believe probably after sharpening their pencils and kind of looking at the information that they've been providing our auditors, that they may have realized that there may have been either they weren't accurate with their charges or something there. I'm not speculating.
Did anybody go to prison?
No, it's nothing like that. No one's pocketing money.
I know. I'm just.
But and we will. Did you want to give us an update where we are
Well,
with?
if I could just follow up,
Sure.
Are you saying that they've caught up with the pension shortfall?
No, not at all.
I didn't think so. No. Then where's
The
the
pension, you're absolutely right, Councilmember. The pension is a big driver for the benefit and costs increase for law enforcement and fire that are in the public safety retirement system. But, you know, that's been built into the base that we've been paying for the last couple of years, that catch-up thing. So basically, if you think about it, we were paying it last year and the prior year. The adjustment here, the 2.5%, is probably just based on whatever cost of living adjustment they're going to be giving the law enforcement officials. They did have some increases on, was it on the vehicle costs for next year in their contract?
And the
costs?
equipment, I believe, yeah, with their, with the dispatch and stuff, I think there was some
Right.
increases there. I know that this time last year, when we had this meeting, we had actually had an in-person meeting with MCSO to kind of go over each individual line item. That hasn't been possible this year, I think, with the hesitance hesitancy of surrounding the COVID and everything. But so we don't have a detailed explanation maybe behind the numbers that we've gotten so far. We haven't had that opportunity to have that discussion with them.
Maybe everybody else understands, but I don't. The courts said they had to make it up, and it was a humongous amount of money. And we were told that's why we were paying 10% increases. And we can go offline and you can explain this to me, but I'm trying to figure out how it's getting paid off.
Well, we had some years where we had more than a 10% increase.
Well, I was
I
going to say, the
understand.
amount,
I
the
understand it, but not to
10%
make-
was never like a hard and fast. It
I
was like, you
understand.
better expect that.
Yeah.
But we haven't actually paid 10% in several years. We did 7 once.
That's not my point. I understand.
Well, in other words, the 10% wasn't like, that was the be safe amount. Expect this, and that was what all the cities were told. But it's been able to be handled by less than 10% for several years.
I understand that. I still don't understand where the money's going, how is the pension's being paid off.
Well,
Maybe their investments have been able to.
Not that amount.
They still have a very large unfunded liability, the county does. And the issue is when they started looking at using some one-time money, like cash, to buy it down, they have it on the correction side as well, which is even bigger than that. So they're like really, and then they had to get an opinion from, or get the legislature to allow them to even do that, because under state law, you can't use one time, or you can't use money to pay down a debt, and that was the issue. So this, yeah, and to the mayor's point, we did tell council that for the foreseeable future, and you've got a really good memory, Alan, that to count on 10% increases. We had some years that exceeded that. If you kind of normalize it, though, we've been under 10%. We've probably been on average about 6 or 7%.
Don't misunderstand. I'm thrilled to pay 2.5.
Right.
And the one year that it was more, the year before, it was that much less. That made it average about 7 for those 2 years. And the legislature and the firefighters, at least, came up with some ideas to mitigate it. So there's a lot of moving parts here.
And we still are paying what they call the, what is that, the administrative fee?
I don't, yes, the
Resort fee. That's still built in, but that,
administrative, yes, but actually the 2.5% increase for this year included that amount as well, so.
Yeah, it's all
It's
one.
overall is 2.5%. And hopefully Larry's not back there saying, refigure the, oh, no, perfect. All right, so we don't have to worry about it maybe he's outside making phone calls saying, oh, they want to pay more. So we'll get off that slide and that topic and move into capital projects. As Grady mentioned, we had our CIP workshop. I did just list the projects here with the amounts that were discussed at the workshop, and some have increased, some have decreased, some have disappeared, some have appeared. If anybody has any specific questions about any of them, our Public Works Director will be happy to help.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Dave, when we were first approached by Rachel, the community center improvements were 600,000 or a little bit more than 600. That included all the flooring, all the painting, the bathrooms, reconfiguration of the front lobby area, furniture. Why did it go from 600+ thousand to 350,000?
Because it's accounting magic.
So
No.
So
So actually,
Rachel spent less money? That is magic.
Actually, it is broken up because we have 2 different funds in play. The capital project portion of that project is listed here at 350,000. That's the bathroom remodel. That's the hard, maybe installed counters, fixtures, that type thing. Things that are basically gonna extend the life of the community center. Painting, carpet, tile, that sort of thing is gonna be paid for out of the facilities reserve fund, because that's more maintenance, upkeep, you could say that paint extends the life of the building, yes, but it's basically
so to the vice mayor's point, it's roughly 850,000, correct? For this portion plus, was it a 500,000?
And I think a portion of that is actually this year, if I'm not, right? So a portion of the 800 total is going to be paid this year, but for next year, I believe the total was going to be 550 between the two funds.
But what is the total cost for the project is what he's asking. Well, I thought it was facilities reserve
Multi-year.
plus
I mean,
the
for
350.
next year, it's
I think it's 850 for the combined total.
350 plus what's the facility reserve for? I believe it's 200. I believe it's 550,000 that we have budgeted right now for the community center for next year between the two funds.
So basically, just to clarify, so everything that we as the council approved, the bathrooms, the tile, the painting, the reconfiguration of the front lounge area, the furniture, everything short of the exercise building she wanted, the Fantasy Health Club, all of that's going through.
The remodeling,
Okay, so that's going through.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, it's going to be over multiple years though, so it's not all happening next year. As far, I believe
Well,
there's
no,
going to be.
no, it is actually. It's first phase is going to be the lobby, which is the flooring, the painting, the bathrooms, some of the counters in the classrooms, and all that. So the subsequent phases of what you saw, that's going to be coming back to you guys at a later date, like maybe the possible expansion
Right.
of the facility. But for next year, and you're absolutely right, it's actually more than 350. It's going to be closer to like 850 or whatever the total is, because we have funding and facilities reserve, and we have this $350,000. So, and David's right, we're starting at this fiscal year, so you're going to start seeing contracts next month coming to council for award of like painting and award of flooring coverings, things like that. But it's going to cover 2 fiscal years because we're starting it this year, and we'll finish it hopefully in the summertime for this phase.
So the plan to, the tile, the painting, the bathrooms and all that, it's still moving forward as far as we're going to close down over the summer.
Yes.
So that by the time the snowbirds come back, we're going to be
The
good.
plan is to be done by the end of October, first part of September, and when people come back, it's going to be a renovated building on the interior.
Excellent.
A good time maybe to say that when we go have the budget next time, May 1st, I think, that somehow we remember what we've already been through, because it's really difficult sometimes to remember what we already discussed. We obviously can change things anytime we want before we get there, but it would be good, I was talking a little bit to Peggy about this to Peggy earlier, just because it's hard to remember what we've already discussed. And when we go back to doing it, maybe even if it's the minutes of that discussion, it will help us as we prepare for the next meeting when we're, actually start
Right.
voting on things.
And just, Rachel had a really good idea, and she's going to, you know how you have like, excuse our mess kind of thing? Well, she's going to do a step beyond that. She's going to show some samples of the floor coverings and, the paint and all that with a nice little entryway board when people come in so they can kind of get excited about what's going to be happening this summer. So.
Kind of a rendering.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
All right. Were there any other questions on capital projects? We good? Okay. So then that takes us, as you'll notice on this slide, we actually, as far as funding sources available for all of the capital projects, this is basically due to my cautious nature with fund balance. This number won't be quite as low, 4.7, 4.8 million for available. We will have a larger transfer of excess revenues over expenditures, as well as leftover projects for this year. The ending fund balance is most likely going to be higher as well.
So you're noting the creative uses of asterisks in this slide?
Yes,
Just
there you go.
pointing that out.
The conservative use of conservative asterisks at the bottom of the page, yes. I'm going to have to start using numbers, I think, regular footnotes. All right, so then we've actually discussed part of this already. The American Rescue Plan was passed in March, total of $1.9 trillion. Arizona is going to receive, all of Arizona is going to receive $1.2 billion. As far as our portion, we're anticipating just over $3 million this year, as well as $3 million for next year. Like I mentioned before, we haven't received anything official as far as Treasury guidance on what those, what that agreement's going to look like. We do anticipate, though, that we're going to get the actual funds before we start the fiscal year. There was a 120-day, I believe, 120-day limit where they had to get the funding to non-CDBG or community development block grant communities within 120 days of signature. So I think when I did that calculation, it was like July 5th or something like that. So hopefully they're a little bit ahead of the ball and get it to us before July 1st. If they don't, it makes it easy for the audit, but in any event, that money will be deposited into the Special Revenue Fund for grants, and we'll stay there and start funding our public safety invoices at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, thank you. Local municipalities will get 1.2 billion. Is our share, is it all based upon population?
That's Arizona.
Right.
So it's the state, county, and local
I
municipalities.
understand, but is it all, are the municipal,
Correct.
based on population? Yeah, thank you.
So there's a portion of those that municipalities that already get community development block grants. That money will come directly from the federal government to those communities under that system, under that formula. And then for us, we don't get that or don't participate in that grant. So it's going to go through the state of Arizona and they'll distribute to us. But it is all based on.
Under the act, I believe the state only has 30 days to distribute that back to the cities and towns that are not direct recipients. So it's pretty tight, narrow.
Correct. Should be a lot faster than how long it took for CARES. All right. Again, best practices to use one-time monies or one-time revenues for one-time expenditures. We did use the CARES Act for public safety invoices. I'm suggesting that we do the same with the American Rescue Plan. That keeps it nice and clean and simple for our auditors. Any time that we receive a federal grant over $750,000, we automatically have to have a single audit, which is a federal audit for uniform guidance. So we're going to have to do that for this year and for the next 2 years because of this amount. And it's just going to be a lot easier if we see the money going into one fund, going out to pay invoices for 4 months, and then being done with it. That paying it out of that fund, those invoices, like I said before, it's general fund savings, so then we can use that for other purposes at your direction. As far as potential uses of the general fund savings, could go towards pandemic-related community assistance, similar to things that we've done in the past, maybe with local businesses or something of that nature. Also, pandemic-related town uses, such as testing sites, vaccination sites, sanitizing supplies, and services. And then that would leave a major infrastructure projects would also be recommended to use those on. And with that, it's the last question slide of the night. So if you've been holding on to them, let loose.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. A little off the budgetary subject, but your slide about pandemic-related uses, testings, and vaccination. I remember, Mayor, the last time we met, you said Chief Ott was working on a site that's going to vaccinate people here, but now that Johnson & Johnson, the COVID vac... Oh, it's not, okay, because
Yeah,
it was...
we basically, Dave was in touch with the county today, and they're still committed to coming out for the pop-up, but it will be a two-shot type
Okay.
vaccine. So we
Okay.
don't know if it's Pfizer or Moderna, but it'll be one or the other.
Okay, I didn't know if we were completely off the table because
No,
Johnson & Johnson's
it's-
been shelved.
It's still on, and I think the only thing is it tomorrow there's a walkthrough? So the county's going to come through, walk through the community center, and try to make some determinations, but we're very close to being able to put out the official word on this.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
You want me to start at the beginning? and then Go through a second time?
Really get it through.
I can stay late.
We will be, next Tuesday.
He's ready. All right.
Sharon, nobody has any questions then? We're good? I'll take, well,
No,
first,
thank you.
thank you. And really, we really appreciate this. It's so much work, and I know what it's been
Great job.
like for the entire,
Great job.
not just you finance guys, but everybody putting this together. We really appreciate it and look forward to getting through this process pretty well. I mean, this is not bad at all. So thank you again, and take a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you.
Bye.
So I do have to say that